welcome back. This is episode number 3 of the Live, Love, Loss.
And happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell.
And I'm Jason McIntosh.
And we are delighted to be back with you this week.
And thanks for retuning in.
Yeah, we kind of got a little windy last week. Maybe it was just a long topic, but we were talking about the 7 stages of grief.
We were on fire. That's okay.
We ran out of time, got a little chatty.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pick that back up where we left off last week. And just in case you're tuning in and you did not yet catch last week, let's just recap for you. So we were talking about the 7 stages of grief after you've had a loss. And number 1 is shock. So we talked about just the mere shock of, what is that moment like at the time that you lose someone and you're in that stage of shock because you've just had a major loss. Number 2 was denial. So the denial and the many different stages of denial as it relates to loss. Number 3 was anger. That's a big one. We spent a long time on that one.
We were angry.
Well, and there can be a lot of anger around loss, right? When it's a big part of the grief. Number 3 is just huge. I think anyone that's had a loss close to them will definitely experience anger, probably sometimes for many years after that.
Certainly.
Right? I mean, shoot, Jason, you died, your wife died and you were left with some littles. So you probably experienced a lot of that, I would imagine, for many years.
Well, and 10 years later, I had the loss of my son as well.
Yeah.
After the loss of my wife. So, yep.
And the 4th one was bargaining, just to recap on that one. And so this was where you're trying to make deals to avoid the loss, avoid the feeling of the loss and that moment of grief. And I think kind of where we left off, Jason, we were just diving into depression. And that's a big one. That's probably, I would say, as big as anger. They're probably 2 of the highest, longest running emotions in the grief cycle, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say. It's one thing that may never really go away because you're going to have moments and you're going to have feelings. So it's just important. I think we might have talked about that a little bit, just to have outlets, and just have support, help,
So I'd be curious to know, and I'll talk about my experience, but how did you deal with that? And I just, to give the person listening in some perspective, I know for myself, I say I'm not a depressive person. I'm not. I just never really get depressed. But if you have a major loss, like that's going to happen. And from what I know of you and the time together that we've spent, you have that same personality style where you just don't get depressed.
Yeah, and
you're too busy to get depressed.
Yeah, that's it right there. So it's going to be way different for everybody and their circumstances. So you have to imagine when it first happened for me in 2008, I had a 9-month-old infant and I had an 8-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. So, I didn't have time to even mourn or grieve properly. So I was just go, go, go. I already had a high demand career. I was in the auto industry, the car business, and, you worked a lot of hours and it could be a very demanding career. So it's just go, go, go. And then, it's a whole different thing when you lose a spouse, especially early on when the children are young.
I can't imagine.
That's
really,
it.
I cannot. I feel so blessed to not have been in your position.
Yeah,
when I lost my spouse.
It was very, especially, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, for a father as well, because we don't have that inherent, motherly and paternal instinct. So it's something I had to pick up very quickly and learn and adapt. So yeah, I think I said this in our last episode. As a father, I just, in my mind, I feel like whether it's true or not, a child needs a mother more than a father, not to take anything away from fathers out there. It's just, as a father, I would have traded places in a heartbeat. So that's fathers are providers, and mothers they're just givers and nurturers, so it's that inherent, provider mentality as a father to take care of everybody and keep them protected.
Right.
So I think that's just,
so for you were too busy to be depressed,
that
right?
was it.
Like you had these 3 littles. So at what point did you have bouts of depression, right? And there's probably a person listening to this show right now that is not that, right? They're just the normal 9 to 5 and they're deep into this depression. So when did it hit you?
Let me tell you something. Just because you're a happy-go-lucky person, you're the life of the party, and you make everyone in the room laugh and you bring this energy, those can be those people can be some of the most repressed, depressed people,
That's true.
And you don't realize that. So, because that is you're projecting this
Well, you're giving a lot of energy out.
That's it. And that in of itself is a lot of work and could be tiring and exhausting, but it's almost this persona that you're projecting, and you might be masking some things. So, I mean, that's why if you can take a lot of things out of our discussion, even if you've never experienced a loss, and thus it's live, love, loss. So we talk about everything and they all kind of intertwine and relate with each other. Even if you've never had a loss, we just need to be aware of other people in our life. Even strangers, someone going down the street, you can't imagine the power of just being kind to someone and what that can do,
Smile, hello, are you okay?
Yeah, that's it.
What can I do
for
today?
sure.
How can I help?
And I think it's always really cool and neat when, I don't care where you're going into 7-Eleven and someone holds the door for you. I mean, a man holding the door for a man.
It's super
a man
kind.
holding the door for a man, and then, hey, thank you, sir, and it's just a form of respect. It doesn't matter age, color, race. I mean, it just happens when I see it happen. That's a good feeling.
It's a little smile in your heart. It is for me when I see that. Like you said, even a man holding the door for another man, whether they're older or not, it's just a kind thing to do.
So yeah, I want to dive into this depression a little bit, because we can't think of the stereotypical, oh, I'm so depressed. And because depression, I mean, you could, again, different forms and different ways to grieve. And I probably got a little personal because I think this is we got to get a little vulnerable. In order to do that, we got to be honest with ourselves, and we really have to tell the truth, whether we're ashamed or not, right? So I think I went through my depression, was in the forms of maybe, self-medicating or drinking, and I did, because it was a lot to handle. And, yes, it was go, go, go. I didn't have time to mourn, but sometimes I would feel like these just waves, just like I would be on my way to work and you're just going, and just find myself sometimes you just have to pull over to the side of the road because you just have this wave of, it's indescribable really, unless you've actually experienced it,
Was there anything that would trigger you? Or sometimes out of nowhere?
Great question. And, if I'm triggered, and it may be, that will always be probably the foundation of triggering effects. So there's other things in life, now 17 years later, because although it was like a blank, that was a lifetime ago. 17 years is a long, long time.
Yeah.
So there's some people that will never have a relationship that lasts 17 years.
That's true.
Or they might be in 3 or 4 or 5, or maybe the longest they've ever had in their life has been a few years. So you can have there can be 5 different relationships in that span. So I think for me, the reality of being alone, and whether if you're in a relationship, you're still in a relationship, so you still get to come home and honey, how was your day, and talk about things. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship, but regardless of whether my wife and I would still be married today, we were still friends, and we raised children together, and we made each other laugh, and I know there would always be that. So when you take all that away, it can be very lonely, and your children provide a certain level of comfort for sure.
Just different.
But it's so way different. It replaces it. And so, for me, probably the triggering effects may be, deep, they may be regressed as far as a lot of these feelings that, like the depression, the anger, and all of these different denial and the shock. You do still always, there's remnants of all of these 7 stages, I think, still there. You might move past it, but it's still burned into your existence. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The depression is a tricky one, and it affects a lot of people in a lot of
I
different
hope I
ways.
answered that. I didn't
Not
mean to.
really. I feel like you skirted around
No,
it.
I mean, really, but if you're listening, if you know, and I hit every nail, because that's me. And again,
true.
Everybody's different. Your situation's completely different, so you can sit here and say, yeah, but there's people listening right now. They're like, man, he is on it. Everything I'm saying is going to resonate with someone out there in similar circumstances.
Well,
so we're all a little bit different. I think it's important to realize that.
He had a depressive type. he could be depressed. He battled a lot with anxiety and depression. We didn't talk about it. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple and everything was perfect and our life was like freaking Main Street USA, right?
Yeah.
From the outside, that's what it looked like, but nobody knew the things that we experienced at home. And so there would be times he would just wake up depressed, like wouldn't get out of bed, just super depressed. And I would be like, what's wrong with you? Why are you depressed? What's the matter? You can't be depressed, And so for me, and I think a part of the dynamic that we brought each other, and he was really good about going to the gym, sometimes better than me. And so what I learned in that is if you are depressed, if you can just make yourself move, it will help. It'll pull you out of that. And, I would do the same thing for him when he would wake up and just not feel good, not just feel like he's in a funk and depressed. And I would say, I love you. Wake up. Come on. You're not being depressed today. We're going to go to the gym. Let's go.
Well, okay.
Like, I don't want to go. I don't care.
Here's
your shoes. Here's your clothes. We're going.
That's interesting because I think your circumstances will kind of shape and mold your version of these 7 stages of grief, because thinking of my own circumstances, like you mentioned, it was go, go, go. So I didn't really have time to maneuver through the 7, but I was still experiencing them. So, you go, go, go all the time. And then when, silence can be deafening, right? And so though I think that's the time where it was the hardest.
But stillness.
But then, again, I didn't get a lot of that because I had an infant at home. And I had a little bit of support and, mother-in-law, my wife's mother, and she's close by. We tried the au pair thing. I got an au pair from Ukraine, 6 months, paid in full. I think 90 days in, she discovered like the internet boys, and she disappeared into the night. So that didn't work out too well.
What are you even talking about? I have no idea what you're saying.
An au pair? You don't know what an au pair is?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Producer Rob, you know what an au pair is, right?
Okay. You need to educate our listener because they don't know what you're talking about.
An au pair is someone that, it's kind of like when you have a foreign exchange student for school.
Okay.
This is for child services. So they come from another country, right? You sponsor them. They move into your home. You pay them. Obviously, the dollar conversion is so much different. So you pay the service who pays them. So, I mean, it's an affordable way to have childcare because childcare can be expensive. And I had to have full-time childcare, right?
So it's like a foreign exchange student-ish.
But they're not a student. These are
an
adults.
Adult that helps you with childcare.
Yes, correct. They live with you in your home.
I didn't know that.
They become a part of your family for that time.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm always a bad picker. So I picked the wrong line when I go into the wrong line at the grocery store. Of course, now it's the self-checkout. But so I just didn't pick the right one, and that's what happened. So yeah, everything. I mean, it was such a blur. It's hard for me to even. I really have to stop and like think about it because it was just it just. Yep.
The depression for me, and I don't experience a lot of it. A lot of who I am, I just don't do it. I don't break down that vulnerable side of me very often.
Up, you're gonna have to.
I will. I promise. I committed to that.
3 shows in.
But I just don't. And so I would say when I do experience this, for me, a lot of times, I told you like kind of like the sundowners, right? So initially, like I would say the first 3 months, it was very much when the sun was dropping. And I became aware of that. And I was like, nope, this is not going to happen. I'm going to make sure I am busy at sundown because I am not feeling like this. I don't like it. And so that's what I would do. And then I would say I'm past that at this point. And so now when I feel these little parts of depression, it's usually not so much in the morning when I wake up, but a lot of times when I go to bed. Like
so
being
interesting.
In bed alone by myself for 5 months now, it's weird,
Yeah.
For the longest time, you talk about like the bargaining and the denial. I think I told you my husband experienced like mad cramps. Like they would wake us both up out of a sleep. So sometimes, especially towards the tail end of his life, he would sleep on the couch. And so, part of this was, oh, he's just on the couch, right?
Yeah.
Like the kids would say, oh, he's just in the bathroom. Then you come to the realization that, he's just not there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes going to bed alone, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's painful. And
It's
I find
adjustment.
myself, instead of sleeping or doing what I should be doing, I'm doing whatever else.
We're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The contrast for me, you said the sundowners, it's like that for me was my favorite time of the day. And here's why. So I feel like it's during the day when just all of these things and stimuli was just it's just so much, right? My favorite time of the day, the day has ended, and I just couldn't wait just to unplug, like literally unplug, and then drift away, because during that time, when the 8 hours or whatever sleep you're getting or not getting, you're detached from reality.
So
and
I
that
think
I couldn't wait to end the day and get in bed and just disappear.
so. There's the difference.
Yep.
Because if you remember, I told you when my husband passed,
Yep.
I took a solid 2 months off. I did not work. I didn't do
Yep.
anything but just be, right?
Mhm.
I went through a lot of stuff. I got rid of things. We had just moved. We still had stuff in boxes. So I spent a lot of time being busy doing that. And so by the end of the day, I was kind of tired, but it wasn't like as crazy go, go, go as my
Yeah.
normal day. And I think that might have been part of the difference.
Yeah, it's different.
Right? Like if you
Different
live,
strokes
if you
for
live
different
on
folks.
the beach and you're used to walking down the beach every night, seeing the sunset with your spouse, and then you lose them, you're
No,
going to
that's a
feel
fact.
that. That's going to be a hard time of your life.
Your routine, your everyday routine, just
Yeah.
the little things that you do, and just those little expectations that you don't know what you have until they're gone, and it's like, oh my gosh, the laundry really doesn't do itself, and those meals just don't cook themselves, and so the reality, that's
All the things that are missing.
the routine, I think, is the interruption of the routine. I think is
Yeah.
an adjustment.
So depression, I guess my one little tip, and I think I mentioned it last week, would be get busy. Even if you don't want to,
Very
drag
much so.
yourself out of bed, find a partner,
find
a
a
gym
hobby,
buddy.
go to the gym.
Yes. The gym helped me so much. I was so glad I had just reconnected with a trainer
Yep.
before my husband got sick and before he passed. I was so happy that I did that for myself because my downtime was only 2 weeks.
So here's another thing, and it's so glad we're talking about all these things, because now I'm thinking about my situation, and the very first, that was devastating, and everyone around me, was even the shock for them, like, oh my gosh, 34 years old, just gave birth, 9 months, 8 years old, and 13 years old, and just so
People wanna
incredibly
cry
sad.
for you.
So I remember for the first, I don't know, maybe it was weeks or months, where people would bring me homemade meals.
Yes.
Like, so they would rotate every day. They would bring a meal, and that went on. And so there was this sense of support, and they did what they can. And this, no knock to any of these people, because that's the kind of the cruel part of this, is life does go on. But if I can say anything from my experience, for those that know someone going through it, like, it ain't ever over.
No.
So you got to do more, because I think around,
You
not
get
that
a lot of support early, not as
That's
much
it.
a little later.
that's it. And so I think for me, the reality of the situation is, I know my family loves me and the friends and everything. Not that they're not supportive, but it's just like a tendency to forget, and it's like, no, we're still living it. So I think that for me, that loss, I think it's important, if I know someone going through that, it's to keep that in mind. You really probably should make a point of checking in on this person periodically.
Mm-hmm.
Take them out for lunch. Even if they say no, refuse.
Just keep asking.
Yes, demand it.
Yeah.
Check in on people, because they might be hung up on one of these.
True. Yeah.
They might be in denial of being hung up on one of these stages.
So a good segue to the next one is the testing
Yep.
stage of grief. And you were talking, Jason, about drinking a lot, right? Like, and that was part of the depression. And I would say, the testing part is the exploring, the coping, and I can't read my handwriting mechanisms.
Well,
I pulled some of the stuff on the web, because I'm not a counselor, so I'm trying to read.
no, I know
some of
that.
this.
Here's what they define the testing phase as. Testing is the process of trying to find solutions that offer a means of dealing with loss. Someone may drift in and out of other grieving stages during this time. So
Perfect. You brought exactly what I was trying to
yeah, that's the
You're
test.
so prepared this
I
week. I'm proud of
try.
you.
Well, I can on a whim, I can sometimes be handy.
So the testing, it's interesting that you say that. And I remember the timing for me, right? I told you it was before my 50th birthday, or he died the day after my 50th. It's in November. And that was just about the time where, we're in Tampa. So cruise and Gasparilla Cruise are a big thing here. And so you're just starting to ramp up into parade season.
Yep.
right? Like December really starts parade season and it doesn't end.
There's
until,
always
like,
something going on here in Tampa.
Yeah. But I mean, like the crew life is like, it's a whole lot of drinking, a whole lot of nonsense, a whole lot of shenanigans. And so
shenanigans, that's a good word.
I
like
remember drinking.
Fun word to say, shenanigans.
Yeah. It was. I remember drinking a lot, like a lot after.
I don't ever remember drinking a lot or what happens during the. Anyway, go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe you're getting roofied. I don't know.
Maybe. I hope so one day.
I usually remember most of it. I can be the babysitter even when I'm drinking. But, every once in a while.
I'm a large, beefy guy, so it tends, I could hang.
So the testing, like the different things that you're trying to do and explore to cope. I mean, for me, I felt like it was just busy. I got to stay busy so I don't sink into this depression.
Yeah.
And so it was figuring that out.
I remember maybe doing some of the initial counseling for all three kids and sitting in that with them, but I don't recall the duration. And it wasn't very long and extended and didn't go for years, let's say. So, and, later on in life, I had a lot of pent up, I think, stuff. That's a good word, pent up. Especially
You stole that from me.
No, I've always loved that word.
Okay.
I've used that word before.
I said that.
I know, but I've used pent up all my life.
Okay.
Even like pent up, like in the real estate, there's pent up demand. We always say that word. Don't take credit for my pent up.
It's not a regular for me. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I just odd that I used it. It's not a regular.
That word, pent up. It's powerful. So anyway, pent up. So you squirrel.
Keep going, testing.
No, replay testing and testing 1, 2. And I lost it.
No,
and it's gone.
You were talking about counseling.
Oh, yeah. Pent up. Thank you. So I think I suck at that game, the counseling. So I just, you got to buy into it. I tried it. For me, it was the experience of doing it because I've always been the guy that's had health insurance, right? And it's like, oh, what do you have insurance? They just made it so impersonal. Like, oh, do you have insurance? I'm like, yes, it's very expensive. I pay a lot of money for it. And I still, it was like, it was so impersonal and I never got the warm fuzzies and just trying to find the right one. It was too sterile. I don't know. It
didn't work for you.
Did not work. I tried it a few different times.
What did work? What were some of your coping mechanisms?
I don't know.
Can remember that far back.
Well, I mean, again, 17 years and then, 10 years. My son was 2018. He passed. So that was only 7 years ago. So he passed 10 years after my wife. And 2018 was obviously 7 years ago. So, I mean, that's still pretty crisp and fresh. And that's a different type of loss. And that's a hard, because I think I still am, and so I don't think it I don't think it ever really goes away. I just think that you keep going.
So talking about the loss of a child, right? I told you about this dear couple that I know. As a matter of fact, I'm having dinner with them tonight.
Okay.
They lost their daughter and they were in a
worst thing that you could ever
depression for years. Yep. I mean, years and years and years. And when they found out Chris had passed, I remember him literally. He was in the airport almost crying on the phone saying, please don't do what Chris and I did and just live in this depression for 10 years. And so I saw some of the coping mechanisms, right? So these guys, we sold multiple houses. I feel like they've moved around a lot trying to chase happiness. And I'll never forget the one time I'm looking around, as agents, if you're a good listing agent, you're going in, you're looking at everything. You're looking at everything in the house. And I had pulled the shower curtain back and there was a pot plant in the bathroom. And it was just one of those moments like where he just laughed like I'm busted, and it's probably more mainstream now than it was back then. But it was just kind of funny. It was like, okay, I don't care about your pot plant in the bathroom.
Oh,
but
not a plant, not a potted plant, like pot, like weed, marijuana.
Marijuana, yeah. It can't be here when we're selling the house. Cannabis. So we gotta move this guy. So I think that might also be a coping mechanism for a lot of people, especially in today's day and age. They turn to drugs, alcohol, pot, different things like that. Not that it's the healthiest, but I think it's easy.
Yeah, I just think coping. I mean, it's different for everybody, and some people. A lot of it has to do with your internal wiring and how you're built as a person and your DNA and who you interact with, what you do for a living. So, I mean, coping for me, I guess, was pouring everything into what I did as far as my career. I was always everything's just always been larger than life, very intense and just poured all into that. That was like an outlet for me. Like real estate was an outlet when I first got into this career, 2015, before my son passed, and he was supposed to be a part of this and was going to be a part of it. So, coping, I guess, also to keeping their memory.
I work with two of my kids. Let me tell you,
keeping their memory alive.
It sounds more fun than it is some days.
And talking about them, like, so my oldest daughter, who'll be 25 on May 6th, she named her granddaughter that she just had in February. I'm sorry, January. January 20th, the day before my 17-year-old's. I recovered. Halina, Halina, which is my wife's name. She was Polish, and so keeping their memory alive and talking about them and just remembering them. And
that's funny. She named her daughter. I think, did I tell you that we had this 2-day-old puppy that we were taking care of?
Yeah.
About a month after we lost my husband, and really, to give him full credit, he was the nurturer, like way more than me. I know I'm the female, but he could be way more nurturing than me. And my youngest daughter.
No, I cannot see that for a minute.
Full transparency. So my youngest daughter and I were talking about it. We get this 2-day-old puppy. The mom died. You know how hard it is to keep a 2-day-old puppy alive without their mom? And we wouldn't name this puppy until we kind of knew she was going to make it. So probably like 6 or 8 weeks into it. And we're like, what do we name this dog? And I'm like, well, she looks like Coco. I want to name her like Coco Chanel. It's got to be something expensive because she was expensive to keep alive,
I'm in love with the Coco.
So we decided we're going to call this little girl Crystal.
Okay.
So my husband's name is Chris, so her name is Crystal.
Oh, that's cute. I like that. See, that's neat. That's neat.
So little Crystal's a little teddy bear, ball of fire.
Did you find that, I know with my children, it's like they have a sense of awareness and worry, because and that's something I have to stop and think about, like, especially when you try to make all the very best decisions and you want to make good decisions. And, both my daughters, they're very aware of losing a mother, even the 9-month-old, and a brother. So there's that worriness about where's dad and just,
so my kids,
I get a little choked up here. So even, I just had a birthday. And so every now and then they'll say, I just could never lose you. My 17-year-old, she just came in and gave me a hug one day, and she's like, Dad, I just had a dream that, you were gone, and I just had to give you a hug. Right. And for me, it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to put myself in her shoes.
Slow down.
Like
stop time for a second.
You got to slow down. You have to slow down and cherish the moments and make these moments. And because, teenagers, they don't, I'm a pretty hip, I think, dad and
wait, do your kids think that? Or
you
think that?
Yeah. They always talking about my drip, her friends and everything. So, I learned all the lingo. Pretty cool. Are we Gen Xers, right? That's what we are. Gen Xers. Yeah. So boomers. But you make time and you do these things as best as you can, and you make these memories. So I know, we went on a daddy-daughter cruise, myself and her, and, she had talked not so long ago about doing another one. And, I did a Disney cruise with my wife and my oldest daughter when she was younger and my son. I haven't done it with the grandkids, or Ella, my 17-year-old, hasn't been able to go. So we're talking about us all going, and I think that'd be something very, very cool to do, because Disney cruises are a lot of fun, I think.
That was our first cruise ever, was Disney.
Everybody has a good time on those.
So,
make those moments. I mean, you've got to almost be a little intrusive, but I mean, for them, they're very aware, and they get a little protective, and they want to make sure dad's okay, because dad's all I have left, especially they just lost their last piece of their mother, and their brother was my mother-in-law, their grandma, which was their mother's mom, obviously, and she passed away 4th of July, 2024. So that's very recent for them as well. So, yes, my parents are both still alive, but just the almost direct blood extension of their mother, that last piece. So it's very important to be aware of that.
Yeah, I experience this a lot when my husband passed, and we still experience this a lot, I would say even now. And it's a very real thing when a child loses a parent. They get this automatic fear that they're going to lose the other parent right away.
Absolutely.
It's a real thing. I researched it because my kids were so clingy. And I was just like, initially it was overwhelming. I was like, what's wrong with you guys? You didn't want anything to do with me or your dad. Like, we weren't cool enough. And now you guys are like all over me. And they are still that way today. Like,
they're grieving too. They're going through that stage.
They are.
As well.
And we're still in the first year, but it gets a little crazy sometimes. Like, literally, you've heard of helicopter parents.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I have helicopter kids.
Yeah.
So God help the poor soul that actually does try to date me.
Yeah.
I have helicopter children.
Well, and they became more of a helicopter after, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are super possessive. If I'm gone or I'm out or I'm like, I have a crew husband, right? So my crew husband.
It's funny how roles reverse that way, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute. And
I find my kids doing that to me too now that you say that.
The high D in me is like, no. Let me tell you how this is going to go down because I'm the mom and this is my house.
That's it. That's like when the role reversal, like, gosh.
Yeah. And I'm like, and by the way, I'm not old enough. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Don't put me in a home.
So my crew husband is Hayden.
Yeah.
Hayden has his own husband in real life, but he's like my crew husband, you know? So we hang out and he's just like, oh my gosh, the helicopter kids.
Yeah.
Because if I don't answer the phone, my phone lives on silent.
That just means they love you. That's good.
Okay, no.
Oh,
no, Jason. Wait. I drive a Tesla.
Yeah.
So my kids will start honking my car horn. It's obnoxious.
Yeah.
I love them. I know they love me.
Yeah.
But if you're a helicopter kid and you're listening, slow your roll. Your parents love you, but they need to be them, right? So I guess
read the room. You know, we know, like, I mean, I have a real problem with authority and hate being told what to do.
Yes,
you know,
that's what I said.
And so I get it. No one, you know, when you're that way, yeah.
So my daughter and I actually had a conversation about that this morning because I went out last night with some crew people. My flaky little brain said I'm gonna come home and cook dinner, and then I didn't. I left. I went to the brewery with some April birthdays and hung out with them. And I had to listen to what my daughter was saying and take that in and say, you're right. And I get your perspective and I should have done this. And on the flip side, like, you're not going to tell me what to do. So we need to be mindful of this and respect each other, you know? And her and
boundaries.
The younger one, her and I, like, we've talked about this. She's 19, but she is as sharp as a tack. She is a 19-year-old version of me. And I've had to have some very direct conversations with her that's like, look, you and I, we know we're alike. We have similar personalities. And if we get into it, it's going to be explosive. So we need to be mindful of that and respect each other because it won't be good for either one of us if that happens.
The takeaway here throughout these 7 stages, that just illustrates that communication is important throughout all 7 stages.
Right.
So because everybody's boundaries are a little bit different and everybody's personalities are a little bit different, some stronger personalities, some more subdued. So I think it's important to talk it out because obviously they come with the best intentions and the purest intentions. And so, like, for me, it's like, hey, love you. I understand why you're doing that, but you also know who your father or who your mother is and how we're wired. And so, you know, appreciate it, but let's talk about some boundaries or set some systems and processes in place, if you will.
So let's talk about that. And one of the other stages, I don't even want to say next because they don't necessarily happen in this order. They're all over the board and sometimes a couple at once, and they're not in this order. But reconstruction is a stage of grief, and it's where you're trying to rebuild your life. You're trying to find what your new normal looks like on the other side of this loss.
Yeah.
And I remember, and like, mind you, I'm not hardly dating. I don't do any of this stuff, right?
Yep.
I hang out with like people I know. Well, I guess my kids saw that one time as a date, and it's like, no, for me, in my eyes, I'm like, no, this wasn't a date. And so my oldest daughter literally said, well, I feel like you're cheating on dad.
I went through this, and you know, I did go through this, and there was that, my oldest, she may not remember, I hope she doesn't kill me or hear this, but I can remember she was 8, and so I do remember a time I always try to be very mindful, and it's going to happen. I don't know, it's just going to happen. But you know, you try to keep them away, and everybody's a little different when it comes to dating and the kids and bring them around. A lot of it, I think, has to do with her age.
Yeah.
Versus teenagers versus young children.
She's 25.
Right. That's different. Way different. So I think, I remember she had said, like, in her mind, she didn't ever want me to be with anybody ever again. But that's how you think at 8. Because it's a replacement. So, yes. But even kind of, listen, that went on even in her, so that's a lot of this. So they're grieving. And I see, when you're asking me all of these things, and I'm thinking about how it pertains to myself, now that we're on this subject, I'm thinking back on how it pertained to my own children. Mm-hmm. Because they're
reconstructing their life too.
Listen, I'm getting somewhere with this. Even almost after I had a kind of a longer serious girlfriend there of 2 years. My daughter hated it in the beginning, and she was like, I think
was this the first one after you lost your wife, Helena?
No, gosh, no. This is why I moved down here. This was like 2016, 8 years later. So she was already older, so longer than 8 years later. So no, it was 12 years later. So she was already had a child of her own.
Okay.
So I remember that very clearly, and it never really goes away, and it sticks. So everyone's a little different,
So how was that for you, right? Because this reconstruction,
they call it here. So I think it's similar. They call it acceptance, which is, I guess, similar. You accept it.
Well, they're different.
Well,
I think they're different.
My 7th stage is called acceptance on my page.
Well, no, acceptance is one of them.
Okay.
Yet that's also acceptance of the person that has been lost, right? Yeah. It could be acceptance of the new life, but it's really just acceptance that person is not going to
That's exactly how it defines it. We'll go ahead and define it. This is the final stage of the grieving process. Acceptance does not mean people feel okay about loss. Rather, it means they realize the loss is their new reality. Nothing you can do about it. They understand that while life will not continue as it did before, it will go on. Right. This stage may involve organizing roles and forming new relationships.
Well said. Yeah.
Yes. So, and that's part of the reconstructing and building a new life with new relationships, whether it's intimate, romance, romantical. Did I say that word right?
Yeah.
That type of thing, or friends and support systems and counseling and all that.
It's kind of cute because you see the kids and they really try to replace that. That's what I've seen. Like my son, my daughters, they really try to be like, hey, Mom, how can I replace that so that you don't have to do that again? And I don't think they understand. It's just a different dynamic. It is so different.
Well, for me, it was almost one of my things my wife did say, and we talked about it before, she became heavily medicated. And you have those conversations early when one, you have lost it so sudden, you don't get to have those conversations. And then when someone's going to die and they're on the journey and the road to death. So we talked about it. She knew I was going to be left with young children. And she just said, whatever you do, just to make sure that if you remarry, that they are good to the children.
Yeah.
And that never happened.
Mom's worst fear.
Yeah, it never happened. I never was put in that situation, so there was never a replacement. My kids are grown, so it still hasn't happened. I'm still single. So going back to that.
In 2025.
But listen, going back to that, we had the discussion. My wife had a discussion with me, just make sure, because it is a reality. It's a real situation, and in my mind, I guess I thought, they do need a motherly figure in their life, and I was blessed because my children are pretty low maintenance and very self-sufficient. I think this process turned them into
strong little human beings.
That's
it.
Sounds
like
where my oldest daughter is the greatest mother you'll ever meet, besides her own mother. And it's because she became a mother at 8, so
that's true.
So there's a lot of power behind that, a lot of heaviness.
Yeah. The acceptance stage, I think for me, I probably accepted it a little bit earlier than my children did. And that's because I knew he was sick, right? So I was coming to terms that this was going to happen before it even happened. I had to make peace with it because it was the inevitable.
And your children were older, so they understood what was happening.
But at the same time,
My children were so young, they had no idea what was happening.
I was telling my kids, look, your dad is sick. You need to spend all the time with him that you can. You need to tell him you love him. When he wants to hang out with you, you should do it, right?
Yeah.
And they almost didn't take that seriously. It's like they didn't believe it. There was a little bit of denial
of it.
Yeah, in advanced stages. And so I think the acceptance it's still not there for some of my children. My oldest daughter is getting married this year. That's going to be very
that's tough. Yeah.
hard when her dad is not here. And, I remember even when he was sick, like having to make decisions for his health care that were just terrible and horrible. And, my kids witnessing some of this and my son crying and saying, Mom, I can't, I had to talk to them. And I said, look, your dad and I were each other's, like we had to make the decision for each other. And now that I'm alone and I don't have him, you guys are going to have to do that for me if it ever comes down to this. Cause I'm never going to live like that. So promise me you'll never put me in that position.
Yeah.
And my son, I can still remember him today, like it was yesterday, crying, saying, no, Mom, I can't do it. I won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. And I said, look,
well, it's too new. They're thinking
it probably was, but
that's what it is.
I had to tell them, I had to say, look, the one thing that you guys probably don't realize, and you might as this stage progresses and as your life progresses and you have time to think about things, is, your dad and I would be the younger couple, always traveling, always doing things, planning fun things, and really living our life. Because when we would go on trips, like even to Europe, we went the March before he passed, and we would always comment about older people traveling that can barely get around.
That's
right?
the truth.
And we would say, you know what? There has to be this work-life balance. There has to be this live today while you're healthy and you're young enough to like truly, thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah.
And not be so old that you can't do something that you would have done if you were younger. And so we did a lot of that, and we lived a really freaking great life, and I had to remind my kids, look at all the vacations and the trips and the things that you guys have done with us, not including things that your dad and I did alone. We had a really freaking great life.
Yeah.
So if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and you have to make a decision for me, you need to understand that I had a great freaking life.
Yeah.
And, don't make me live like that. And so...
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's hard for the kids to hear that. And then, there's the rebuilding of all the financial stuff to make sure that my kids wouldn't have to probate everything. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of it. Like when you're a couple and you have your affairs in order and then you're the only one left, you got to redo all your stuff. So I think as you go through those things, that's part of the acceptance stage, right? That, okay, that person's not there anymore to make those decisions. Someone else is going to have to do it. Who's going to do it?
Yeah, no, it's all very true. All good points. I mean, things for people listening, for you to consider and to think about it. And these first probably 4 or 5 episodes, we're going to be dealing a lot more on the loss side of the live, love, loss, because, that's part of what really was the starting point of this outlet and this platform that we're discussing. And it will definitely nurture into other areas and arenas. I promise you and assure you.
We talked about in episode 1, didn't we? How this whole podcast can be. I think we did.
Yeah, we did. Absolutely.
So if you missed it, you're gonna have to go check.
And if you're having such
a
great time, feel free to go back and listen to episode 1 and 2 if you're tuning in for the first time today.
We're going to talk about some cool, fun stuff too, which I personally cannot wait to talk about just because it's so green for me. Yeah. Like the whole dating arena in 2025 is that's going to be
fun. Very fun. And I think what's cool is what everybody needs to understand is we just literally jump on these mics. And so what you see is what you're getting. There's really no preparation here.
We're treating this like a live show.
This is off cusp. And we might have little bullet points and something we're following, but all of this is ad lib.
Because we have to make sure we both don't squirrel in a totally different direction.
But we're so busy during the week that it's, it's Friday before you know it. And we want to be prepared, but I mean, boom, it's like that.
Well, I wrote down some other stuff. I've got ideas for the next shows. I just forget what they are. That's what, my brain is processing, not storage. That's what I use it for.
Well, we're both in real estate too, so we probably should put that disclaimer out there. So that's a pretty full-time thing, Yeah.
We were talking about that during the week, and I was like, okay, on the dating apps, when I get a real estate, I'll tell you why, and I'll probably show this again, but
Oh boy.
when I get a real estate
Nope,
person
don't do
that's
it
a
yet.
match,
It's
I'm
early.
like, delete.
Oh yeah. It's embarrassing.
Well, did I tell you that the first thing I ever did was did Facebook dating, then I ended up deleting it like not even a month into it. But there was a guy on there that recognized me that was an agent that was in the old KW office, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're some agent that falls below the radar.
No.
Don't.
We
the
are
production's too high.
pretty much public figures at this point. Everybody, when you're on the level of production that we do, I mean, everybody.
They look at you different.
They
They almost idolize you a little bit.
They do. And so there's a responsibility there. And, but also too, like, listen, producers blow off steam, and you have to, because it's such a high demand and such a go that you have to deal with that pressure and you have to let loose, a little bit. But there's definitely the balance.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll tell you my journey since I'm pretty fresh in it as we move along in the episodes ahead in the future, and it'll be interesting to get your perspective, Jason, and especially the difference between a male and a female.
I'll need about 10 episodes, but go ahead.
Yeah, we'll do that. So, we probably should give it a phone number if it's all right with you. I'll give out the radio number that I use for my other show.
Go for it. Yep.
So if you're listening to this and we haven't yet dropped any episodes, we're 3 in the bag. I think we'll get one more before we release the 4 we have. But if you've got an idea for the show, you want us to talk about something, you want us to bring on a guest.
Yeah, if you want to come on the show and talk about something.
Yeah, I think it'll be so fun. 813-377-2775.
Yeah, it's like Katrina said, we aren't licensed therapists. We are licensed real estate agents, but that almost in essence gives us, we live in that lane a little bit sometimes, therapy every day, talking people off the ledge. But whether it's an agent or whether it's a client, we do that all the time. We help people with major life decisions. But we have gone through some stuff. So
and this show really was just about our perspective of losing a spouse and losing a child, and how do you live in 2025 and forward, and is love even out there, and what does that look like, and what are the non-negotiables and the things like that. And those are some of the cool things we're going to talk about.
Super cool. I look forward to that for sure, delving into that. Well, some good stories to tell, I'm sure.
I wish we could tease you for next week and let you know what we're going to talk about, but it's in my notes and I don't have it, so you're going to have to stick around for
But it will be fantastic, I can assure you.
All right.
So, we've really, I think, covered all 7 stages of grief properly. So,
and remember, these are not in order. Maybe shock is, but they the rest of them can come and go at different times. They're very intertwined, and you will experience a huge range of emotions here. And the anger is a big one. It's
interesting because I almost feel like I'm putting myself under the microscope and kind of thinking about each one of these and like what really did happen, and so you gravitate towards experiences and feelings and things, stories that you've heard us tell, but we may not realize in that very moment that we were going through that stage. Because, for me, again, there's always the question. I mean, it's very fresh for you, and my first loss was, I'll say it again, 17 years ago. But even then, I mean, it's still always there. And then, 7 years ago, my son. So it's fresh or old. It's still loss.
For me, it's so surreal because I feel like I'm sitting in this moment, and it's been 5 months, and the weeks and the days and the months are just flipping forward like a calendar.
Even when if you're older in life, and I don't have any living grandparents left, and I loved each one of them and have fond memories of all 4 of them. And
I don't either. I think we're too old to have living grandparents, probably.
Yeah, and so, but my mom and dad are both still alive and very, very young, right? So,
my father is not. My mother's alive.
I don't even really want to think about those things. I mean, 70. My father will be 72. My mom will be 70 upcoming the next few months, and so they're still great shape and relatively young, and have another 20 or more years in front of them. So,
and the reality of the show is, like, if it hits and people enjoy it and we do it long term, we may bring some loss into this.
Well, and kind of where I was going with that is, like, we're talking about like the spouse and the child, but even like losing a parent older in life who passes away at 89, 90, that could be just as hard because they've just been around you your entire life and then some. That's a bigger, larger chunk of life, when you know someone. I've had friends that here recently have lost a parent in their 90s, and you think, oh, no big deal. I mean, they lived such a great life. I mean, 90 years, but that's also at the same time, it's a large chunk of their life. Now, I also relate this back to untimely deaths and deaths that you just don't understand. I might have mentioned in some previous episodes, the not understanding suicide and someone taking their life. And I've had close high school friends that have done that. And then in the military, being in the military, as a veteran, there's loss too. And you have veterans coming home with PTSD because of what they're going through and seeing people, and people they're close to, deployed with, that kind of loss. So there's all the loss of I'm telling you, the loss of a pet. When we lost our pet that we all bought together as a family, it hurt.
You feel like you lost
almost as much,
piece.
And then
remember that same couple I told you about? You brought up pets, so I have to share this story. This couple, I told you they moved around a lot, right? So they had moved to
that pet rat?
Ruskin.
No,
I know. Anyway, they had moved to Ruskin, and this was a new construction community. They were building stuff, and they had their daughter's dog. It was this pit bull, and they just loved that dog. It belonged to their daughter. And I remember especially the guy, he loved this dog. It was like their piece they had left to their daughter.
Yes.
And I was in that neighborhood selling a home to a different client, and I recognized the dog. She was out and they were nowhere. And I was like,
oh, wow.
What the heck? I literally, the client I was with, I literally said, all right, hold on a minute. Like, I'm so sorry to be with you and put you on hold, but I have to go deal with this dog right now.
Yeah.
So I grabbed the dog. I knew that was her. I called her. I'm like, hey, Jewel. And she came right to me. Looks like a scary pit bull, right? And I said, come here. You're not supposed to be out here. I know you're not, because she was an inside dog.
Yeah.
I walk there. I ring the bell. No one's answering the door. I'm looking outside in the gate to see how she got out. Saw nothing. So I let myself into the gate, walk in the backyard, and I'm looking around, trying to see how this dog got out and put her back in the backyard because the doors are locked. No one's answering the door. The next thing I know, I see him opening the window from upstairs saying, Katrina, what are you doing? Are you here? I'm like, Jewel was down the street making friends with the construction workers. I don't think she's supposed to be there. You didn't answer the door. So anyway, we had this whole conversation, and they finally lost the dog. But when you have your family pet, like what you're saying, or like in this case, a little piece of their daughter that was left, that's a hard piece to lose.
It is. I mean, it might sound cruel in a way that it hits you very similar in
it's like it brings
impact.
It back.
No, it really does. It stirs it up for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a piece of you, So I mean, there's memories attached to it. You remember the day you got the dog. You remember the trips and just experiences, and just stirs up a lot of emotion.
It's hard. It's a hard one. So we'll talk about these as they come up in life for us. But I can promise you, we're going to talk about living after a loss. We're going to talk about love.
Loving and loss.
What the heck that looks like. Apparently, we both have this screwed up, but we're going to have some fun with this as we progress.
Do you ever really have
in the weeks ahead?
Yeah. And
then the loss, the loss part of it. Like, how the heck do you live in it if it's fresh? What do you do when the stuff comes up? And the everyday after a loss.
Yeah. And I think what's cool about this is for those listening, they might be currently in a situation where they have a sick relative, whether it be spouse or child or friend, or they just recently lost someone, or it happens suddenly too, and just like the love part of it too. And so I think this is really going to resonate and be very relatable for just about anybody listening.
We want you to know it's going to be okay.
It will be okay. We are still here.
It doesn't feel like it.
Still in one piece.
But
and
it will be.
Not every day is going to be easy, but just, again, it's find your outlets and, your support system, what that may look like, and, stay busy. Again, everybody's a little different. I think that's probably the takeaway.
Jason, one of my really good coaches that I've had in my life, mentor, she had a saying one time that she said, and it's so true. And going back to, and it's probably a great place to leave it, talking about it's hard, right? It is hard. And she told me, she's like, life is hard.
Yeah.
Everything you're going to do is hard, but I think you get better with age when you choose your hard. You choose what you're going to deal with that's hard.
Well, it's inevitable that death is going to be a part of our life at some point in time. We just don't know when. So, and I think that that's maybe something that it's so taboo to talk about death, and especially when you've had loss. So, and I think even now I'm thinking about it myself, and it's like, oh gosh, I mean, it sounds morbid, but probably should talk of, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, but like it could happen anytime. Yeah. And listen, I tell you, like I get scared. I get the crap scared out of me too when it comes to my own children and my grandchildren. Now, I get scared for them, and I get scared of. No, God, I just the fear when you go through. There's so much trauma that you have stored up, that pent up, stored up, that it hits you differently. You think about things you wouldn't normally think about. If my son was still here, if my wife was still here, I don't think I would be as, but now it's just like I get a paranoia.
Yeah. Here's the interesting perspective about that, just listening to you say it. And I think this is part of the reason why we're doing the show. It's a real feeling, right? So I'm not dismissing that.
It's a huge feeling.
But I think the bigger point here is you have to live. You can't be so caught up in the paranoia that you're not living for today and enjoying your life, because you're going to look back and have a lot of regret.
But what you can do is it could create awareness, so you can be more aware of where your children are, what they're doing. You're right. You still have to live. You still have to move on.
Good. You don't want it to consume you.
No, you don't. And everybody's going to have a different opinion, because there might be people know I'm with Jason, and people know I'm with Katrina. So, listen, what works for me may not work for you, vice versa. Right. So you take bits and pieces, and you do what works for you. I think for me, awareness is huge, and the perception that this has created for me has really altered the way I interact with people, and probably the more nurturing side of me that I may not have had before. Yeah. I really think I've become more nurturing because it hits you differently. I definitely know I'm a different person after than I was before.
I think it's helped me be a better person for other people too after a loss. Yeah. I told you, full transparency, I was like the avoidance one. Like I didn't know what to say. Yep. Didn't want to say the wrong thing, so I'd.
It's awkward. It's an awkwardness, and it's okay to. I can remember in the beginning when people, the one thing that I almost, you don't think about this before because it's so cliche, probably said it before, is I just can't imagine. And that was kind of triggering for me in the very beginning because I was angry. And I used to think to myself, I probably said it too, but what a stupid thing to say. But now 17 years later, I'm like, it's not so stupid. It's just like, hey, do you need any help? No, thanks. I'm just looking. It's so reflective. A reflex thing for us to do, but in that moment, it's like, no, you won't imagine. It's like you if you want to, you can't stop and think about it. Oh, that's so horrible. What if that happened to me? It's just such a cliche thing to think.
And can you blame them because they don't? It's terrible. You don't want to go through it.
That's my whole point. Is you in that moment, in that stage, you're there, right? And you come out of that. We're 17 years later. I'm like, I get it now. So I think we're right at the hour mark. That's an hour of power. I think it's a very appropriate way to put a lid on it.
Yeah.
And
we'll be back next week for some great content.
Yes, please stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back this time, and we hope to see you again very, very soon.
Give us your feedback. 813-377-2775. You can call or text.
Live, love, loss. See you when we see you.
See you next week.
Bye.